is this KU football roster compared to other rosters across the country in the Big 12? How is Lance Leipold closing the gap, narrowing the gap for KU football? And a little update on which KU football Jayhawks made it to NFL rosters.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. A little bonus episode for you today on LOJ. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. So 247 Sports came out with a team talent composite. We're going to talk about where KU is on there and what it means for KU compared to the Big 12 and the rest of college football and the state of the program under Lance Leipold. All good news there. I'll also get into some of the Jayhawks in the NFL with NFL roster cut day earlier this week. Okay, let's get started there because that 247 Sports team talent composite, which takes into account, transfer portal rankings, high school rankings. I don't know everything that goes into it, but yeah, basically an idea of just how talented is your roster. And Kansas in that came in 48th nationally. They also came in 9th in the Big 12, so about middle of the pack there, which not that big of a difference from KU to some of the other teams. Like you think of the Big 12 being kind of stacked together and these teams being relatively within the same range of each other in terms of talent. And that kind of, fares itself out in this. Kansas just 4 points back. Like they have over, it's like 700 points essentially what KU has. They're only like 4 points back of 6th in the Big 12. So it's really not that much. They're 52 points back of first place in the Big 12, which again is really not that much to separate first and 9th in a conference. They're also 61 points back of being top 25 nationally. So again, not like a huge difference there, but definitely still at least a small amount of a gap there. If you look at KU last year, they were 8th in the Big 12 with a roster rating of 696.9. But instead of being 4 points back, so even though they're one spot higher in the Big 12, instead of being 4 points back of 6th in the Big 12, like they are now, they were 36. And instead of 52 points back of first, they were 70. And instead of 61 points back of the top 25, they were 91. So even though, the Big 12 ranking actually slips one this year from last year's talent roster, you look at the gap between them and the top third, the top team in the Big 12, the top 25 in the country, it's actually closer. The gap is narrowing this year. You might be saying, okay, why would that be the case? Kansas, lost a lot of players and stuff. I think it's just the nature of, the COVID year cycling itself out of the college game where, yes, you still do have 5th and 6th year seniors, but now they're much fewer. There's much, more rarity in those players than there were last year and over the previous, 4 or 5 years because of the COVID year. That has started to cycle itself out. So theoretically, things are, you're not going to have as much talent that's kind of out there in college sports because there's just one less class of players and teams that's out there. So overall, this KU roster is more talented by a bit by the score, but the important part isn't as much that because, again, it's splitting hairs between the ratings of this year's team in 2024, even though 2025 is a little bit higher there. I think what's more important to me is that it is closer to the top in terms of their talent level in the league and nationally. And I think it also shows this whole thing the work that Lance Leipold has done in improving this program, because if you just look at this from a standpoint of, distance from first place in the Big 12 from 2015 through 2022, I guess let's extend to 2023. Kansas was at minimum 280 points back of the team who was the most talented in the Big 12, right? They were last in this. This rating goes back to 2015. They were last every year. 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, and 2022. They were last in this metric every year. They start to scoot up to 12th in 2023 with Lance Leipold. 8th last year, 9th this year. So you're seeing the improvement. Now, obviously, part of that is also, though, that Texas and Oklahoma used to be in the Big 12, which obviously is going to skew it a little where those schools are inherently going to get more of those 4 and 5 star kids than the other schools. So what if we just look at it as how far back was Kansas on this team talent composite compared to the top team not named Texas or Oklahoma. So, a lot of years it ended up being TCU would be third in the Big 12 in recruiting rankings, where now obviously, Texas and Oklahoma aren't even in the league. From that standpoint, they were about 160 back, 170, 159, 153, 163, 166, 165. And then come 2022, they're 133 points back. So you're starting to make inroads. 2023, you're 135 points back. So you're seeing that range. 2024, you're 70 points back. And now this year, you're 52 points back. So you can see the upward trajectory that Lance Leipold has brought the team talent here. And I mean, it just shows that, as much as he has gotten Kansas in a better spot from player development, from coaching, from getting the players in the right situations, they have brought in a lot more talent than they had under previous coaches as well. So what does this all mean for KU? And then we'll get to Jayhawks in the NFL. That next on Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of LOJ is brought to you by GameTime. College football's back, and I don't know how you couldn't be, more exciting. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can sometimes feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, price jumps at checkout. That's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay with GameTime. And I'm looking right now. You can find GameTime tickets for the next KU football home game against West Virginia as low as $40, and that's including fees. If you want to sit, on the new side of the stadium too, section 115, I'm looking at $86, row 10 in section 115 there, kind of in the end zone. So plenty of tickets just like that at GameTime. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. Thanks again for joining us on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks here. And don't forget to check out our KU Wagner recap. We'll have plenty more action getting you ready for the Missouri game as well coming this upcoming week on Locked On Jayhawks. So what does this all mean? Obviously, like I said, they've narrowed the gap a little bit. The talent is better than it's ever been for Lance Leipold in Kansas. The improvement they've had, mirrors the improvement they've had with the stadium and everything. But also at the same point in time, even knowing all that, it still feels like there's a gap there, right? Kansas 48th in the country in talent rating, and you're still sitting there going, okay, well, I'd like this to be at least a fringe top 25 team or something. I don't know. I'll say this, I don't know that the difference between being the 40th most talented roster versus the 70th, it's not that wide. And realistically, yes, if you want to be a national title contender, you can't be the 48th most talented roster. From that standpoint, you got to be top 10, top 15 in football. But if you're just talking about having a great season, winning the Big 12, you look at K-State, they have some years where they're a little lower on this rating. Iowa State, some years is a little lower on this rating. BYU was lower on this rating last year. For instance, last season in the Big 12, BYU obviously, tied for first in the Big 12. They were 16th of 16 in this rating. Iowa State was 15th of the 16 in the Big 12. Kansas State was 13th. So now, then again, you could also say, okay, Arizona State was second last year. Nobody was picking them to do well. Maybe that should have been an indication they were more talented than we thought. But point being, especially in the Big 12, where the talent levels are not that different between first and 16th, between, fourth place and 12th place, for instance, the scheme, the coaching, the development, how you use the guys that you got, that's going to make up that gap more than you think. And so I don't know what the monetary number is. Is all that stuff worth 100 points? Is it worth 200 points on this? So sure, maybe, it limits Kansas to they're not going to be a Clemson or they're not going to be an Alabama, right? But you can have the 48th most talented roster and have the 15th best season in college football. We see that happen all the time, right? And so from that standpoint, not being a top 20 talented roster, maybe it matters if KU ever plays Georgia or Alabama or Michigan or Ohio State. And I'm sure it matters too in terms of consistent high level success. The more talented you are, the higher your floor is going to be. But again, you can overperform it pretty regularly, and teams do. And again, the difference between being the 30th most talented and the 80th most talented, it really is just going to come down to player development at that point in time. So it is kind of all dependent. And, again, in the SEC, if you're the 13th most talented roster in the SEC, the difference between that and being the second most talented in the SEC, I mean, that's probably a good amount of like 4 or 5-star NFL players. The difference between being the 13th most talented in the Big 12 versus the second, it's really not that big of a deal. So I think Kansas is in a good spot, even though, it does matter some of those other things a little bit more. But it doesn't hurt to have a talented roster when you're doing those other things right as well, which I think Kansas and Lance Leipold are. All right, how did the Jayhawks do through NFL roster cut day? We'll get to that next. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Upside. Are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, you might think it's a little too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL, and offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Thanks for joining us on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, check out our regular show as well, and thank you to everydayers who already did. I did want to make mention as well before I get to these Jayhawks with NFL rosters. I haven't had time to mention this, but Warren Corman, who was the last living architect for Allen Fieldhouse, he was the youngest who was on there when they originally made it, passed away, lived a great life, 99 years old. I mean, or I don't know if he was 98 or 99, but born in 1926. So lived a great life, lived a long life, and obviously very instrumental. And he was, sharp as a tack, kind of, it seemed like, to the very end, doing interviews and stuff. We had Shalon David on with us, if you caught that episode, talking about stories from the fog, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, something like that. And he told a story about how, he was talking to him, and he said, yeah, Fog Allen would drive down, it seemed like every Friday or something, to check in, okay, what's going on? And this is what I want to do, and yada, yada, yada. So go check out that episode if you missed it, because there was a cool little insight and story into that. Okay, how did the Jayhawks do with making NFL rosters? Well, Dorance Armstrong sticks around with Washington, so cool to see there after they made it to the NFC Championship game. Armstrong has had himself a very nice NFL career at this point in time. Austin Booker, Dominic Puni from the 2024 draft, they're still on the rosters. Booker obviously had that monster preseason game. Puni unfortunately hurt right now, but he had a really good rookie season. Bryce Cabledew and Devin Neal both made it after they were drafted in 2025. And then you have Hakeem Adeniji, who he was waived, I think, initially from the Cowboys, but they brought him back. Sometimes that happens just from making things work, roster, the red tape of NFL roster building, so to speak. But he is on the Cowboys now at this point in time. Then you look at some of the other Jayhawks who got waived. Jason Bean got waived. We'll see if he gets picked up by somebody. Felt like he had a good enough preseason the year before that somebody will give a shot to him on practice squad. At the very least, you would think, any of these players who get waived and don't get picked up at some point this season will probably be prime candidates to be, important players in the UFL or something, for instance, come the spring. JB Brown got cut as well. You had Mello Dotson, Luke Graham. That one a little surprising. He had the big punt return touchdown that people love the highlight of. So again, wouldn't be shocking if he gets picked up somewhere. Jeremy Robinson, Steven Sims, he's had a long NFL career. So we'll see what goes on there. And then Craig Young. And then there were also Logan Brown, Kobe Bryant, and Quentin Skinner. They got all cut, but they got signed on practice squads. Logan Brown got signed by the Cleveland Browns practice squad. Kobe Bryant got waived by the Falcons, but then signed by their practice squad. And then Quentin Skinner, same thing, got waived by the team he was on, the Jets, signed with their practice squad. So we'll see if any of those guys can work their way up to NFL rosters. At the very least, life on the practice squad, it's not as glorious as the NFL, but it's still good living. You're making six figures, you're playing football, you get a chance to make it up to one of the big squads. Other teams can pick you up off of their practice squads, that if they have a need, boom, all of a sudden you perform well enough and are thought highly of enough around the league, then you get an opportunity somewhere else. So hopefully those guys can make it and have long NFL careers, and hopefully the guys who did get waived get another shot out there. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Again, check out our recap episode from KU Wagner, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Locked On Jayhawks.